My grandkids said, "You smell old." So I removed them from my will that night. They giggled like it was a joke. "Grandma smells like the attic," Lily said, scrunching her nose. "No, like old milk and mothballs," Ben added. And just like that, they laughed. 3 generations around the dinner table, and not one of them told them to stop. Not my son, not their mother. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, smelling of hard years and soft memories, and knew, tonight, something would change. They giggled like it was a joke. "Grandma smells like the attic," Lily said, scrunching her nose. "No, like old milk and mothballs," Ben added. And just like that, they laughed. 3 generations around the dinner table, and not one of them told them to stop. Not my son, not their mother. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, smelling of hard years and soft memories, and knew, tonight, something would change. The chicken was dry, the rice undercooked, the peas straight from a freezer bag and boiled until the color gave up. But I chewed every bite slowly, quietly. At 78, you learn not to spit out bitterness. You swallow it with dignity. My son Mark was fiddling with his phone under the table. Amy, his wife, had already disappeared to the kitchen, pretending she needed to check on dessert. Only it was store-bought lemon bars, and we both knew it. The twins, Lily and Ben, were back to their tablets, the glow of cartoons dancing across their 2 young faces, their 2 loud mouths. No one looked at me. I finished my plate, stacked the dishes, thanked no one. In the guest room, which used to be the laundry room until they shoved a twin bed against the far wall, I sat on the edge of the mattress and unlaced my shoes. The fan above ticked with each rotation. The sheets smelled faintly of detergent and something else. Mildew, maybe, or memory. I wasn't crying, not anymore, not after the first month. You run out of tears eventually. You run out of names to call the silence. Mark had asked me to move in after the stroke, said it would be simpler, said he wanted to help. But what he wanted, I realized quickly, was to feel good about not putting me in a home. This way, he could pretend I was part of the family, even if they barely acknowledged me. I became something between a houseplant and a relic. Low maintenance, easily ignored, and vaguely in the way. At first, I told myself it was just an adjustment, that kids were kids, that Mark was tired, that Amy had a lot on her plate. I reminded myself how they visited me every weekend when their father was still alive, how they used to bring flowers, ask about my garden, even call just to say hi. But flowers wither, phones fall silent, and love, if not watered, turns brittle in the vase. That night, as I sat in my too small room, staring at the too high window that let in only streetlight and no sky, I heard them. From the hallway, through the vent above the closet. "She's just always there," Amy's voice, low and sharp. "She doesn't even try," Mark replied. "Just watches everything. She smells like old. I can't explain it. The house feels heavier with her in it. Heavier. They used that word. The bed was cold, but I didn't move. I didn't cough, didn't knock on the wall. I didn't remind them that I raised Mark after his father died, worked 2 jobs to keep him in school, sold my wedding ring to cover his first car insurance. I didn't say a word. Instead, I did something else. I opened the drawer by the bed. My fingers, still stiff from arthritis, reached past the Bible, past the bottle of aspirin, to the leather envelope tucked in the very back. I slid it out. It made a quiet shushing sound. The paper inside waiting patiently, like me. The deed. The will. All of it, signed and notarized. They had forgotten something. Or maybe they never knew. The old family house, the one they now rented out, the one my grandchildren called too spooky and way too far from Starbucks, was still mine. Legally, solely, irrevocably mine. Mark never asked. Amy assumed. And I had never corrected them. But now, as their voices faded and the children's laughter buzzed behind closed doors, I unfolded the papers with deliberate hands. I read every line like scripture. My name, Margaret Ann Gray, printed neat as daylight. They said I smelled like the past. So I would show them what the past remembers. And if you've ever been made to feel like you've expired, like your worth has a shelf life, like your presence is a burden and your silence is expected, then listen carefully. I'm not telling you this to stir pity. I'm telling you this so you know you're not alone and you're not finished. Not yet. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because here we don't raise our voices. We raise the stakes. The next morning, I made the coffee, same as always. Medium roast, 2 scoops, water from the filter pitcher. No one ever said thank you, but I didn't expect it anymore. That's the dangerous part of aging, not the forgetting, but the quiet acceptance of being forgotten. Amy floated into the kitchen in her workout leggings and tank top, ponytail bouncing like a metronome of efficiency. She opened the fridge, frowned. "We're out of oat milk." "I can add it to the list," I said. She didn't answer. Mark walked in a minute later, half-shaved and already late. He grabbed a banana, kissed Amy on the cheek, and muttered, "Later." Not a glance in my direction. I poured myself a cup, sat at the corner of the table. Lily came down, dragging her pink backpack. Ben followed. Both stared at the TV screen mounted on the far wall, already streaming some morning cartoon full of yelling animals and flashing colours. They didn't say good morning. They didn't even seem to notice me. And still, I stayed quiet. That's the trick of living with people who don't want you there. You learn to disappear without leaving. Later that day, I called Mr. Halperin. He was our family lawyer, or used to be. He drafted the will after George died, helped with the trust, checked in every Christmas. I hadn't spoken to him since the stroke. His assistant said he still kept his office in the brick building downtown. "He'd love to see you, Mrs. Gray," she said. "He always asks how you're doing." I made an appointment for the following Thursday, quietly. No one needed to know. That night, I overheard Amy on the phone again. She was talking to someone about that house. My house. I don't know why she's still holding on to it. It's not like she needs it. We could sell it, finally have the cash for the extension. Mark said she might sign it over once we... Her voice faded as she walked into another room. I didn't move, didn't blink, but I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just weight, like a stone settling in water. That house, it wasn't just a property. It was the kitchen George and I tiled by hand in 1972, one crooked square still hidden beneath the rug. The back porch where Mark took his first steps. The bedroom where I cried into the pillow the night I lost the baby in 78 and told no one but the walls. The clawfoot tub where all 3 of my children had their first baths. The hallway lined with their height marks in pencil, years stacked like tree rings. They saw wood and plumbing. I saw memory nailed into every beam. I stayed up that night, not with worry, but resolve. There are moments when silence shifts. Not into weakness, but into decision. You start taking mental notes, rewriting your own narrative in the language of facts, not feelings. I pulled out my notebook, the one I kept hidden under the mattress. I began listing $8,400, Mark's college tuition, sophomore year, after his financial aid ran out. $2,000, wedding gift when he married Amy. Cash. $200. Emergency dental work for Lily when Amy's insurance hadn't kicked in yet. $500. Groceries during Mark's furlough. And on, and on. I wasn't keeping score. But I needed to remember. By the time the sun rose, I had 7 pages. Each line was a piece of me. A quiet withdrawal from a savings account no one acknowledged. I had paid for so much more than they remembered. And now they wanted the house. I closed the notebook, pressed my hand flat against the cover. No, they had already taken enough. On Thursday morning, I wore my navy blouse and black slacks. Not for show, for strength. I dabbed on the same perfume I'd worn since 1989, the one George said smelled like honey and rain. Mark asked where I was going. Just to the pharmacy? I said. He nodded, didn't ask if I needed help. At Mr. Halperin's office, everything smelled like carpet cleaner and thyme. He looked older, yes, but his eyes crinkled when he saw me. Mrs. Gray, he said warmly, rising from behind his desk. Still sharp as a tack, I see. We talked for an hour. I told him everything. The children, the laughter, the house. He listened with the kind of patience only old friends know how to offer. When I finished, he nodded slowly. You want to change the will? Yes. You sure? Yes. Anyone still in? One person. He pulled a fresh folder from the drawer. I'll need a name. I gave it to him, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had done something that mattered. I took the bus home. The sky was soft with clouds. The world smelled of pavement and jasmine. When I walked through the front door, no one noticed, and that was fine, because something had already changed, not in them, but in me. The thing about being invisible is, after a while, you start seeing everything, like how Amy never says please when she talks to the delivery men, how Mark checks his phone every time the kids speak to him, how Lily and Ben have learned to interrupt, to talk over each other, to laugh too loud and apologize too little. And I wonder, when did manners become optional? When did kindness start feeling like currency, something too expensive to spend on your elders? I sat by the window that afternoon, folding towels. Not because anyone asked, but because it made me feel useful. The linen closet had always been my favorite. Neat rows, soft scent, the illusion of order. A good towel, properly folded, can almost feel like control. Ben passed by, nose wrinkling. Mom, the laundry smells like Grandma's purse, he whined. Amy didn't even pause. Just toss a dryer sheet in next time, she said, flipping a page in her magazine. A purse. As if I were made of lint and old receipts. That night, I didn't join them for dinner. No one noticed. I stayed in the guest room and made myself a plate, leftover casserole, half a banana, and a cup of peppermint tea. I ate slowly, quietly, like someone visiting her own life. I kept thinking about the house, my house, the one I hadn't stepped into in 6 years. I pictured the faded shutters, the creaky porch swing George insisted on keeping even when it started splintering. The hydrangeas I planted after my mother died. I wondered if the bird bath still stood under the elm tree, if the fence still sagged on the south side. Did they even visit it anymore? Or had it become just another box on their spreadsheet? The next morning, I made the call. Realtor, small firm, woman-owned. Her name was Carla Nguyen, early 40s, by the sound of her voice. Yes, we do private listings, she said. Yes, we handle legacy homes. Yes, we can move fast. We scheduled a walkthrough. I asked her to meet me there alone. No signs, no open house, just quiet dignity. When Thursday came, I dressed with care. Beige slacks, my cream cardigan, the brooch George gave me on our 25th anniversary. The house key was still on my ring, though I hadn't touched it in years. Carla met me on the front walk. She didn't blink at my age, didn't speak slowly like I was made of porcelain. "You lived here?" she asked, looking up at the gables. "I built this," I said softly, "with my husband. From nothing." She nodded. "Let's go inside." The key turned with more resistance than I remembered. The door creaked, not in protest, but like greeting an old friend. Dust hung in the air like memory, but it was still home. The same wallpaper in the foyer, the same scuff mark on the banister where Mark scraped his backpack every day for a year. The same smell, old wood and lemon oil, and something deeper. Time. I walked through the rooms in silence, touching corners, brushing fingertips along windowsills. Carla trailed behind, taking notes. She didn't rush me. The kitchen still had the brass handles George installed himself. I smiled. One of them was crooked, always had been. I used to joke that it gave the drawer personality. Carla paused. "Do you want me to price it as is?" "Yes," I said. "No renovations, no staging. I want someone who loves it, not someone who wants to flip it." We stood in the living room, sunlight slanting across the floor. "I'll list it discreetly," she said. "I already have 3 buyers in mind. Cash ready, serious people." I nodded. "And you're the sole owner?" "My name's on every document," I said. "Always has been." Her eyes were kind, not pitying. "All right, Ms. Gray, let's get you free." That night, back in my too small room, I placed the folder from Mr. Halperin in the drawer. The new will, the old deed, the letter he said would be delivered to Mark the moment escrow closed. I stared at the ceiling fan, ticking gently. They said I smelled old, but what they didn't know, not yet, was that history has a scent too, and some legacies, once stirred, rise like smoke. I didn't sleep the night before closing, not from nerves, from clarity. It was like my mind had waited years for this moment to sharpen. The fog of grief, of compromise, of silence, it lifted, and what was left was me. Not the mother, not the grandma, just Margaret Ann Gray, a woman with a pen, a deed, and a memory like a ledger. At 9 a.m. sharp, Carla sent me the documents. I sat at the kitchen table, alone, as usual, glasses low on my nose, the cursor blinking beside the words, "Sign here." My hand didn't tremble. Click, click, click. It was done. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Let the silence carry the truth. Around noon, Amy asked me to watch the kids while she ran an errand. She handed me a grocery list and said, "If you're going out later, could you grab these?" I nodded. Mark came home late that night, as usual. He didn't ask how my day was. Just set his briefcase down and said, "Can you make that soup again sometime? The one with the barley. Amy says it's the only healthy thing she actually enjoys." I said sure. I was always saying sure. But that night, I wrote 2 letters, one for Mark, one for Amy. No accusations, no stories, just facts, and a photocopy of the new will. I sealed them, labelled them, and placed them in the drawer with the others. Carla called the next day. "All cash offer. Cleanest I've seen in 6 months. Young woman, 35. Teaches at a local college. No kids. Wants a garden. Says she fell in love with the crown moulding and the light in the breakfast nook." I smiled. "She's got good taste," I said. We set the closing for the following Monday. I asked Carla to deliver the ownership transfer documents in person to Halperin, who would take care of everything else. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I went shopping. Not for food, not for medicine, for fabric. A pale blue cotton, soft as a whisper, and some thick yarn, slate grey and mustard yellow, the kind that feels warm just sitting in your lap. The clerk asked if I was making a gift. I said no, I was making something for myself. I spent the weekend sewing, a curtain for a window I didn't yet have, a throw for a chair I didn't yet own. Because sometimes healing starts with preparing for a future no one else sees but you. Sunday evening, I packed a small suitcase, just a few clothes, my notebook, the new will, the old photos. I took my tea mug, the one with the chip in the handle, and the brooch George gave me. That was all. No one asked why I was in the hallway at dawn. No one saw me slip out the door with my case. They were too busy living in a house they thought would always be theirs. Halperin met me outside his office that morning. He held the envelope like it was sacred. "They'll receive it by noon," he said. "Courier. Confirmed delivery." I nodded. "And your new place?" he asked. I pulled a slip of paper from my pocket. It had an address, 1-bedroom apartment, downtown, walking distance to a park. Paid in full with the deposit from escrow. "Keys in hand," I said. He smiled. "You're not running, Margaret. You're choosing." That afternoon, I moved into my new apartment. It wasn't large, but the windows faced west. The light touched everything like it remembered how. I unpacked slowly. The tea mug went on the windowsill. The curtain I had sewn hung soft and perfect over the rod. The throw, my first act of freedom, lay draped over the arm of a thrifted chair. And for the first time in years, I sat without bracing for someone to call my name with a list of chores. That evening, I drank tea with both hands. No one interrupted. And across town, Mark opened the envelope. They said I smelled old, but I smelled of lavender that night, of ink and finality, of a woman who remembered who she was before they asked her to forget. The call came at 1:43 p.m. I didn't answer. Another at 2:17, then 3:05, 3:07, 3:08. Like desperation had a speed dial. By dinner, I had 10 missed calls and 1 voicemail. "Mom, what is this? What is this letter? You sold the house?" A pause. "I don't understand. You didn't even tell us. You didn't even—" The voice cracked. Amy's voice in the background. "She can't do this. Can she do this?" Mark again, louder. "Mom, call me back, please." I didn't. Not because I was angry, but because I had already spoken. They just hadn't listened. I boiled water, poured it over mint leaves in a small white pot, watched steam rise like memory. Across from me, in the silence of my new kitchen, sat no one, and it felt better than being ignored by everyone. By morning, Halperin confirmed delivery. Legal, binding, irrevocable. Amy called next, left a message. "You didn't even ask us, after all we've done. We gave you a place. We let you stay. We—" She stopped herself. Or maybe the truth did, because that was always the thing. They didn't give. They tolerated. And there's a difference. I poured my tea, opened the window, let the air in, new air. Air that didn't smell like reheated resentment and unspoken debts. The next 2 days were quiet. Then came the knock. Not on my door, on theirs. Carla delivered it. Per my request, notice of ownership transfer. Vacate within 30 days or face legal eviction. Amy, I imagine, turned pale. Mark, likely, turned red. The twins, well, perhaps they asked why Grandma's name was on the envelope. But that's the thing about children. They don't forget what you teach them. And I had just started teaching. I didn't answer the next dozen calls, didn't reply to the text that said, "Mum, are you okay?" Because now, finally, I was. Instead, I wrote. Not to them, to myself. I wrote down every instance they had made me feel small. Every time I was talked over, walked past, set aside. I wrote it not to nurse a wound, but to close it. Because we don't heal by pretending it didn't happen. We heal by naming it, owning it, and then setting it down. That evening, I walked to the small park near my apartment, sat on a bench, watched two children chase bubbles, laughing like the world had no teeth. A woman near my age sat beside me, crocheting slowly, her hands more patient than strong. She glanced at me, nodded politely. "You live nearby?" I said yes. She looked at me for a long moment. "You look like someone who just gave up a heavy secret." I smiled. Or set it down. She didn't ask what it was, and that, too, felt like kindness. Back in my apartment, I hung a single photograph. George, me, the old porch, before the walls turned quiet, and I whispered into the empty room, "I didn't leave. I arrived." They said I smelled old, but freedom has a scent, too, like paper and ink, like tea and open windows. The first time I used the word guest to describe myself, I was scrubbing a casserole dish no one thanked me for. It slipped out of my mouth like breath. Unmeant, but true. "I'll just be in the guest room," I had said. Amy nodded, not even looking up from her phone. And Mark had already gone upstairs. The guest room. Not my room. Not a room. A temporary thing. A folding chair in someone else's life. But now, in this new apartment, I was no one's guest. The keys were mine. The floors creaked under my feet. The tea steeped for my tongue. I was alone, yes. But for the first time in years, I wasn't lonely, just uninterrupted. I spent the following days slowly reclaiming space. A chair near the window with a lamp I liked. 3 potted herbs on the sill. Mint, rosemary, thyme. Not for cooking, for remembering. The letters from Mark and Amy kept coming. Emails now, desperate, confused, apologetic, angry. It shifted each day. The tone. Like they were trying on emotions to see which one would unlock the door again. But I didn't reply, because what I wanted wasn't an apology. It was recognition, and they still hadn't learned the difference. On the 4th morning, I opened a message from Amy titled, "Let's Talk." It began, "We understand you're upset, but this seems extreme." Extreme. As if reclaiming what's mine was a tantrum. As if erasure had been gentle until I dared to speak. She ended with, "The kids are confused. They miss you." Did they? Did they miss my smell? My silence? My laundry folding? I stared at the screen, then shut the laptop. I made a sandwich, turkey and cheddar, heavy on the mustard, sat at the little table by the window and ate every bite slowly, as if teaching my body it belonged here. After lunch, I pulled out the notebook again. I wrote down everything they never asked about. My hysterectomy at 41. Alone in recovery, George asleep in the waiting room. The time I pawned my wedding pearls to pay for Mark's braces. The letter I wrote to Amy after the miscarriage. The one I never gave her because she said she wanted to forget it happened. The first time Lily told me I was too slow to help with her puzzle. I wrote it all down, not for them, for me. Because if I didn't remember it, no one would. That evening, I made soup. My kind. Thick, brothy, full of real vegetables and leftover rotisserie chicken. The kind that fills a room with the smell of care. I ladled it into a deep blue bowl and sat with it by the window. The city moved below. Not fast, not slow, just alive. And then my phone rang. Again. Mark. I didn't answer. Then it rang again. Amy. Then Lily. I let them all go to voicemail. Then a final chime. A new number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said pick up. So I did. It was Carla, my realtor. "There's something I think you should know," she said. I straightened. "Go on." "A woman came by the house today, said she was your daughter-in-law. She tried to enter. The new owner was there. She had to call the police to keep it from escalating. I said nothing. Carla continued, careful. I just thought you'd want to know. It's handled, but she seemed unwell. I thanked her. Hung up. Then, without even thinking, I got up, opened the window, let the cold in, let it sting my skin like truth. Amy had gone to the house she told people was hers, the house she hadn't built, the house she now couldn't enter. And still, she didn't call to say I'm sorry. They said I smelled old. But now I smelled of eucalyptus balm and hard-won peace. And no one would enter this new home of mine without knocking. Mark showed up on a Sunday. I was repotting the rosemary when the buzzer rang. I hadn't given the address to anyone but Carla and Halperin. But I wasn't surprised. Sons have a way of finding things when they feel something slipping. I watched him through the peephole first. The same coat, the same slump in his shoulders, the same boy I once carried through a fevered night, whispering, "You're safe. Mama's here." I opened the door. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was a problem he didn't know how to solve anymore. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He didn't comment on the size of the apartment, didn't ask how I was, just stood in the center of the room, looking at everything and nothing. "You sold the house," he said. "I did." "You changed the will." "I did. Without telling us. You never asked." He flinched at that, just a little. "Good." He sat down, finally, on the chair with the yellow throw. His hands rested on his knees like a child waiting to be scolded. "I don't understand," he said. "You lived with us. We took care of you. You gave me a bed. That's not care." His eyes flicked to the side. "It wasn't that bad." I said nothing. He rubbed his face, then looked up. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm correcting a mistake." He stared. "I gave," I said, "without asking for anything back. And somehow you began to believe that meant you were entitled. That my love was a resource you could mine, over and over, without ever tending to the land." "Mom, I was not your tenant, Mark. I was not your burden. I was your mother." He looked away. "I let it go for too long," I continued, voice steady. "I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I folded towels instead of unfolding truths. I waited to be seen when I should have stood up." He shook his head. "So this is what? A lesson?" I leaned in slightly. "No, it's a boundary." We sat in silence. Then, softer, he said, "Amy's furious. I'm sure she is. The kids miss you. Do they? Or do they miss the idea of someone absorbing what they throw?" He sighed. "You've changed." "No," I said. I remembered. He stood slowly. "So that's it? No path back?" I looked at him. Really looked. Not the man he became, but the boy he was. The boy who used to run barefoot through the house, his laugh echoing through the halls I painted, the floors I polished, the lunches I packed. And I said gently, "There's always a path, but I'm not the one who has to walk it." He nodded. Once. Then turned and left. The door clicked softly behind him, and I stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the knob. Not sad, not triumphant, just free. They said I smelled old, but now I smelled of soil and soap and something they hadn't counted on. Resolve. I took the bus back to the house on a Wednesday, not to intrude. I had no keys now, and no need. But I wanted to see it, one last time, from the outside, like visiting a grave where something important had been laid to rest. The trees along the street looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just outgrown the scale of memory. The mailbox was still there, dented slightly from the winter of '97 when Mark hit it with the snowblower. The same squeaky hinge on the front gate. I knew it by sound before I saw it. The new owner, the young professor, had already planted tulips in the front bed. A soft yellow, wide-petaled, the kind that close when the sun disappears. She'd hung a small wind chime on the porch. No flags, no clutter, just intention. I stood across the street, hands in my coat pockets. No one came out, no lights flickered on. It was just a house again, not a battlefield. And I didn't cry, because some griefs aren't for losing. They're for returning to the earth, like compost. They make the next thing possible. I turned and walked back to the bus stop. The wind picked up, lifting the edge of my scarf. I smelled mulch, a hint of jasmine from someone's garden, and rain somewhere distant. Back home, I poured tea and sat down with my notebook. I wrote 3 things. There is no expiration date on dignity. Family isn't who says they love you, it's who acts like it. You can reclaim your life, even in the last chapter. Later that afternoon, I took a folder to the post office. Inside, a donation letter to a women's shelter. The signed agreement for a fund in my name. The Grey Garden Fund. Instructions for the quarterly disbursement of resources to women over 60 who've been displaced, neglected, or made to feel invisible. It wasn't about revenge. It was about offering a seed to someone else. Because I had known what it felt like to be erased in a room full of people who claimed to love me. And now, I wanted to be the hand that says, I see you, even if I never meet her. That evening, I made a second cup of tea and watched the city lights bloom one window at a time. Somewhere, Mark was trying to explain what had happened. Somewhere, Amy was scrolling through listings she couldn't afford. Somewhere, Lily and Ben were asking why Grandma didn't come over anymore. And maybe, just maybe, they'd begin to understand that some silences aren't passive, they're decisions, drawn in ink. They said I smelled old. But legacy isn't a scent. It's what lingers when the door has closed, and the room still remembers your name. I first met Halperin in 1985. George and I had just bought the house. We were younger, full of fight, and absolutely terrified of paperwork. Halperin guided us through it, with jokes about his bad coffee and a calm that made me trust ink more than I trusted numbers. Now, 40 years later, I sat in the same chair across from the same man. The wood panelling hadn't changed. His hair had gone mostly, and his hands shook more than they used to. But when he looked at me over the rim of his glasses, he still saw the full story. Not just this version of me, but all of them. You ready? He asked. I've already done it, I said. This is just the last stone. He smiled. The fund is active. First disbursement goes out next week. The director of the shelter sent a note. She said, "Tell Ms. Gray we don't just thank her. We believe her." I nodded, too moved to speak for a moment. He slid the last document across the desk. One signature. It finalizes everything. My hand didn't hesitate. After I signed, he placed the pen down carefully. You've rewritten more than a will, Margaret. You've rewritten the story they told about you. Outside, the sky was overcast, soft with pending rain. I walked slowly to the bus stop, not because of age, but because some moments deserve to stretch. A woman on the bench beside me smiled. She had a baby stroller, a grocery bag, and tired eyes. Cold day, she said. I nodded. But good for planting. She looked confused for a second, then smiled again, wider this time. You live nearby? I do now, I said. She laughed gently. I just moved. Starting over? I looked at her hands, calloused, careful. Me too. We sat in silence after that. Not the uncomfortable kind. The shared kind. When I got home, I lit a candle, lavender, set it on the windowsill, watched its flame flutter. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. I hadn't invited anyone. It was Lily, alone. I didn't open the door right away. I stood behind it, letting the moment settle. Then I turned the lock. She looked small, no backpack, no coat, just a sweatshirt and damp sneakers. "I found your address in Dad's email," she said quickly. "I know I shouldn't have." I said nothing. She looked up. I wanted to say I didn't mean it. What I said, that day. I looked into her eyes. So much like Mark's when he was 10 and trying to lie about breaking the window with a baseball. "You said I smelled old," I said softly. "I didn't mean it to hurt," she whispered. "But it did." "I know." We stood there a moment longer. Then I stepped aside. She came in slowly, like someone entering church. She looked around, touched nothing. "This place smells like tea," she said. "It smells like me," I answered, and we sat, not to repair, not yet. But maybe, to begin. She sat on the edge of the couch, like it wasn't allowed to carry her weight. Lily had always been the louder twin, the one who stomped when she walked, who sang off-key without shame, who once told her teacher she liked the smell of books, because Grandma's house smells like that too. That was before the slights, before the laughing, before they learned from their parents how to look past me. Now, her voice was small. "I don't know why I said it," she murmured. "I think I was trying to be funny. Ben started it, and we were just being dumb." "You were being children," I said. "But that doesn't mean I didn't hear you like a woman." She nodded. Her hands were clenched in her lap. She kept glancing at the shelves, the window, the candle, everywhere but me. I let the silence stay. Sometimes silence does the work that words only interrupt. "I didn't know you owned the house," she said eventually. "No one asked." "Dad always said it was the family home." I smiled, slow. "It was. I just happened to be the only one who ever paid the taxes." That made her laugh, a quiet, surprised laugh. I got up and poured her tea. Mint, light. I didn't ask if she wanted it. I simply handed it to her. She took it with both hands. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she asked. I did, in my way. "You just didn't hear it?" She looked up. Her face was softer now, not a child's anymore, but not quite a woman's either. In between. "I miss your garden," she said suddenly. "The one with the fence made of old tools, and the mint patch by the porch." I blinked. "You remember that?" "I used to pick the leaves and put them in my socks. Thought it would make my feet smell nice." I laughed then. A full, warm sound I hadn't made in months. That explains a lot. We sat like that for a while, tea cooling, light shifting. "I don't know how to talk to you," she said quietly. "Not like this. Not after everything." "Start by talking to me like I'm not invisible." She nodded. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not as a child, as a person." That mattered. When she left, she hugged me, awkward, unsure, but she did it first. And when the door closed, I stood in the quiet and didn't feel alone, just present, just here. Later that night, I took out the old photo albums, the ones Mark never asked to see, the ones Amy said were clutter. I laid them out on the table. Not for anyone else, for me. There was George, holding baby Mark in the yard, the hydrangeas in bloom behind them. There was my daughter, Ruth, riding her bike down the gravel path, helmet askew, smile wild. There was me, young, thinner, but unmistakably me, holding a pie, flour on my cheek, barefoot on the back porch. I touched the edge of the photo, whispered into the stillness. I built something. Not just a house, not just a family, a life, with walls and doors and gardens and grief, with memory, with muscle, with love, even when it went unseen. They said I smelled old, but I smelled of roots, of earth, of stories planted deep, and starting, finally, to bloom again. I didn't hear from Ben, not the next day, not the next week. Lily sent a text, short, careful. "Thinking of you," I replied with a heart. The kind that says I hear you, but not come over yet. I was learning something new in these weeks alone. Boundaries aren't fences. They're gardens. You don't build them to keep people out. You plant them so things can grow in the right direction. With space. With intention. The donation receipts started arriving. The Grey Garden Fund helped 3 women in the first month. One got her own apartment. One started classes again. One just got glasses, after 10 years without. Halperin sent me a note. "You've done more with this than most families do in 3 generations." I read it twice, then folded it and slid it into the back of my notebook. That weekend, I baked a pie. Peach. From scratch. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I wanted to. Because the smell reminded me of summers in the old house, George humming off key, the kids chasing each other barefoot, Ruth laughing so hard she hiccuped. That night, I lit another candle, and I started writing the final letters. One for Lily. Not to thank her, but to witness her, to tell her I saw her trying, and that it mattered more than she knew. One for Ben. Unopened, unneeded, but ready. Because if he ever did reach out, I didn't want to write from fresh pain. I wanted to write from peace. And one for Ruth, my daughter. She'd been gone from this world 5 years now. Cancer. The kind that takes more than it shows. She was my youngest, my quiet one. The one who always brought extra napkins, always sat beside the kid at the party no one else noticed. She hadn't been perfect. None of us are. But she'd never let me carry my own grocery bags, even at 39, and she would have never laughed when I walked into a room. Her letter was simple. "You were the kindest proof I ever had that I hadn't failed as a mother." After I sealed them all, I opened the window. The city moved beneath me like a tide, steady, unbothered. I closed my eyes, breathed in the scent of pie, candle wax, and night air. Then the buzzer rang. I didn't move right away. When I answered, the voice was hesitant. "It's me," Mark said. I waited. "I'm not here to argue," he added. I need to understand." I let the silence stretch. Then, quietly, I found the receipts from college, the braces, the everything. "I didn't know, Mom. I didn't know how much." I didn't open the door, but I stood closer. He continued, voice catching. "I thought giving you a room was enough. I thought not sending you to a home meant we were good sons, good people." Silence again. I see it now, that it wasn't about the room. It was about whether it had a door that opened both ways. I said nothing. Then, almost a whisper, "You were trying to stay part of us, and we made you a corner." The intercom clicked off, and I stood in that moment, not triumphant, but still. They said I smelled old. But that night, I smelled of forgiveness, not yet given, not yet refused. Just waiting, like pie on a windowsill, for someone to come home the right way. The letters went out on a Monday. Lily's by hand, slipped into the mailbox with a small pressed flower tucked inside. A mint sprig from my windowsill garden. Ben's by post, though I wasn't sure he'd read it. But dignity sometimes means giving people a choice they never gave you. Ruth's I kept. Some things belong in drawers, not mailboxes. I spent the morning sweeping the apartment, humming an old tune my mother used to sing. The broom was too stiff, the tiles uneven, but there was peace in the rhythm. Push, gather, lift. The kind of work that tells your body you still make an imprint in this world. I didn't check my phone all day. When I finally did, there was a message from Mark. I read your letter. I sat with it. I think I cried for the first time in 10 years. Then a second. I told Amy I need to step away for a while. I'm staying at a friend's, not asking for permission, just telling you, because you deserved better long before this. No apology, no demands, just truth, plain as gravel. That night, I made my favourite dinner. Warm lentils, roasted carrots, a soft egg on top. Food that fills without apology. I lit a candle, turned on a record, and let the sound of Billie Holiday wrap around the room. No one interrupted. The next morning, a letter arrived. From the woman who bought my house. She wrote with green ink on thick paper. I hope this isn't intrusive, but I wanted to say thank you. Every room in this house feels held. It's not just a structure. It's a memory, a kindness. I found a photo behind the pantry shelf. You and a man, maybe your husband? You looked so young, so full of life. I left it there. I felt like the house wanted it to stay. I cried then, not from sadness, from being remembered, from knowing someone saw me even when I wasn't in the room. I folded the letter, tucked it beside Ruth's, and I whispered aloud to no one. I mattered. Because that was what it came down to, always. Not legacy, not money, just being seen, held, known. I opened the window, let the light fall across my tea, and breathed in the air of a Tuesday that smelled like nothing in particular, and everything at once. They said I smelled old, but now I smelled of paper and ink, of lentils and letters, of love that learned how to stand up and speak. I didn't expect another visit. Not so soon. Not from her. Amy. She stood outside my door with perfect posture, like she was holding up a version of herself she wasn't sure still fit. Neatly pressed blouse. Lipstick a shade too forced. Hands clasped tightly, like she didn't trust what they'd do if let go. I opened the door slowly. I didn't invite her in. She didn't ask. I thought I should speak to you directly, she said. I said nothing. I read the letter. Mark showed me. She glanced to the side, swallowed. I don't agree with everything in it. Of course not. But I see now, she added, softer, that you were in pain, and that maybe I didn't help with that. Still, I said nothing. She shifted her weight. I think I got used to thinking of you as background. You were always just there, quiet, predictable. I looked at her then. People aren't furniture, Amy. She nodded, slowly. I know that now. I think I forgot that everyone's keeping account, even when we pretend they aren't. Her voice cracked. Not broken, just dented. I told the kids you needed space. That you weren't angry, just tired of being unkindly loved. That surprised me. I watched her. And I told Ben he owes you an apology. He said, "For what?" And I said, "For not asking that question sooner." For the first time since she arrived, I saw her blink like she might cry. "I don't expect a response," she said. "I just wanted you to know I'm listening now, even if it's late." I nodded once. That was all. She turned to go, didn't hug me, didn't ask for anything. And that was what made it feel real. When the door closed, I made tea. The good kind. Loose leaves, not bags. I sipped it with 2 hands and stared out the window at the people walking by. Young ones, old ones, mothers pulling children, children pulling their futures behind them like balloons. I thought of something Ruth once said, sitting cross-legged on my porch at 15. I don't want to grow up and forget people. That's what adults do. They get busy and forget. She was right. We forget. And we forget that we've forgotten. I didn't forget how Amy looked at me the first time Mark introduced us. Nervous, polite, too eager. I didn't forget how she brought me cinnamon rolls that first Christmas, or how she rubbed my shoulders the night Ruth died. She hadn't always been cruel. She'd just stopped checking her own shadow. Maybe we all do that, if we're not careful. That evening, I pulled out my notebook again. I crossed out 3 lines, not erased, not denied, just softened. And I added one more. Sometimes people return not to be forgiven, but to say they remember. I didn't reply to Amy, but I made space on the shelf beside the photo albums, just in case. They said I smelled old, but now I smelled of possibility. Fragile, maybe, but mine. I planted thyme on my windowsill today. Not for cooking, not for the smell, just because it grows slow and steady, because it stays low, close to the earth, because it doesn't beg to be noticed. But once you do, you never forget it. The woman from the shelter called, the one who oversees the Grey Garden Fund. She said, "One of our women asked me to tell you." She didn't know anyone still believed women over 60 could begin again. I sat with that for a long time. Then I opened a blank page in my notebook and wrote, "We don't begin again. We begin still. There's no dramatic second act in aging. There's just continuation, if we're lucky. And sometimes, if we're brave, there's also reclamation." Lily visits on Sundays now. She brings little things, flowers in old jars, clumsy muffins, news from her world. She doesn't apologize every time. That's how I know it's real. She just shows up. She listens. Ben hasn't come. Not yet. But I have a feeling. Not a hope. Those are for the young. Just a readiness. I've thought about reaching out to Mark again, but not yet. Some silences, once earned, need time to breathe before they can bear sound again. I don't want to fill the quiet with explanations. I want to see if he can sit in it with me one day and just be. The apartment feels fuller now, though nothing's changed. I think that's what dignity does. It expands the air, lets you move freely inside yourself. I rearranged the bookshelf last week, put all the photo albums on the bottom row, easy to reach. Not to look back, but so no one else can hide them again. I've started reading poetry, not the rhyming kind, the real stuff. Words that don't try to impress you, just sit beside you quietly and let you feel. My favourite line so far? I was here. I was warm. I mattered. Yes, that one. I'm not sure what comes next, but I know what won't. I won't sit through another meal where my silence is mistaken for consent. I won't live in a house where my name is forgotten at the dinner table. I won't let someone else write the last paragraph of my life. And I won't ever apologize for growing old, not when I earned every line, every ache, every quiet yes that turned into a no when it finally had to. They said I smelled old. Let them. Because old smells like bread cooling on a rack, like wool sweaters pulled from cedar chests, like letters that were kept, not because they were needed, but because they were loved. Old smells like stories. And I am still telling mine.